The myths of the ancient world still inspire us today in literature and in pop culture. We tend to take it at face value that what history calls myth is nothing more than that. While there are those who firmly believe that every myth has a basis in reality, there's little done to investigate that claim and prove whether it's true or false. Sometimes it does happen that we come across evidence proving that an ancient story wasn't just a flight of fancy by someone writing fiction. Number 10. Amazon warriors. One of the most popular and enduring myths from all of Greek mythology is that of the Amazon warrior. In fact, the idea was so popular with modern sensibilities that the character of Wonder Woman folded that mythology into her origin. According to tales, this was a society of warrior women that lived in Asia Minor or modern-day Turkey. They fought with a power and ferocity to rival any man. For years it was believed that these were just fanciful tales, and the idea of an entire society of female warriors was all but absurd. How could they survive without men? How could they rival other armies in battle? Well, that's something for anthropologists to work on, since it turns out that the Amazon warrior women were totally real. Archaeological evidence discovered in Russia indicates these warriors existed and were likely Scythian nomads. Researchers discovered the grave of 4 women warriors buried alongside their weapons in 2020. They range in age from perhaps 40 to 50 years down to a 12-year-old. Prior to the actual bodies being discovered, many modern historians believed that Amazons were metaphorical rather than literal. They were Persians or even just stand-ins that were put in stories to make Greek warriors look better. And as you might expect, others believed that they were invented by Greeks as a way to demonize women who did not follow what was considered to be the societal norms of the time. Real Amazons roamed the areas from the Black Sea to Mongolia. They may have been among the tribes that the Great Wall of China was built to repel. Homer in the Iliad wrote the first myths about them, and it's likely there were also men in the tribes, and many of the myths were exaggerated and fictionalized, but they were clearly based in some fact. Number 9. The city of Troy. Troy was one of the most famous cities from Greek mythology and has been immortalized on film numerous times over the years. Everyone knows the story of the Trojan horse and how the great warrior Achilles fought Prince Hector of Troy and suffered that fatal ankle injury. The story has everything that makes a great myth, enough to make it seem like none of it could be true. While the idea of the Trojan horse is definitely a suspect one, and it's unlikely any great warrior was all but immortal save for his ankle being vulnerable, Troy was a real place. It was in the 19th century when German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann discovered the ruins of what he identified as the ancient city of Troy in modern-day Hisarlik in Turkey. His methods were not as scientific as they could have been, as he chose to use dynamite for the excavation, which likely damaged a lot of historically significant artifacts. The city of Hisarlik was identified as the location of the mythological Troy for thousands of years, but it was generally dismissed as being a city of the same name rather than the same city from Homer's The Iliad. One of the problems in identifying it is that the city was routinely destroyed and then rebuilt on the ruins. There is evidence of at least 10 cities being built on the same site, which could have all been called Troy, but not necessarily have been the same Troy. Number 8. Giant squid. Some of the hardest myths to take seriously are ones about monsters and giant beasts. Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and El Chupacabra are all likely very much rooted in the realm of fiction. One creature long thought to just be the fanciful imaginings of sailors that turned out to be real, however, is the giant squid. Giant squid can reach sizes of at least 33 feet and weigh over 400 pounds. The largest specimen discovered weighed nearly a ton and was 59 feet long. While stories of these creatures have existed for centuries, the first photographic evidence that they were real, living things didn't exist until the year 2004. Because of the depths at which they live, they're rarely seen, and because they're the largest invertebrates on Earth, stories of them were easy to dismiss before evidence was discovered. Any sailor who claimed to have seen a 60-foot-long one-ton squid would easily be dismissed as just telling a tale. 2 years after Japanese researchers first photographed one of these beasts, a live specimen was caught and brought to the surface, though it was a relatively small specimen at 24 feet. Number 7. The city of Tenea. If you know the history and myths of Troy, you may also know of the city of Tenea. Rumored to have been built by Trojan prisoners of war, Tenea was the place King Agamemnon allowed them to have as their own. Obviously, if Troy's existence was the stuff of legends, then the city built by its prisoners would be just as suspect. But archaeological evidence suggests that this place was also real. Greek archaeologists archaeologist Eleni Korka discovered the city, which was famously mentioned in the story of Oedipus and others in the Peloponnese region of Greece. Located between Corinth and Mycenae, it was a large and prosperous city that seemingly vanished without a trace. Archaeologists had been hunting for the site since 1984. Locals had discovered a sarcophagus unlike any that had ever been discovered, and the search it was on. By 2010, Korka was working with police to stop smugglers who had been looting treasures from the area, which still hadn't been narrowed down to a place that could be legally and properly excavated. The looted statues proved the city did exist somewhere, though, and by 2013 she had permission to dig. Since that time, numerous other sarcophagi, coins, roads, relics, and more have been uncovered. Number 6. St. Francis of Assisi's bread sack. The Friar of Foligni in Italy is home to a curious relic that no other church can lay claim to. According to legend, in the year 1224, St. Francis of Assisi sent them a bag of bread from France. It was hand-delivered by an angel. The cloth bag stayed in the friary for 700 years, reduced to little more than fragile scraps of cloth, and the story survived along with it. The monks allowed researchers to analyze the fragments. Testing confirmed that the fragments date back to sometime between 1220 and 1295. There was also evidence of agosterol on the fragments. Agosterol is a kind of fungus that is known to grow on bread, and it indicated that at some point in time there was likely bread in the bag as well. Obviously, there isn't a test to determine whether an angel delivered the bag to the friary, and its provenance would also be impossible to nail down, but the timeline does check out, as does the nature of what it was. As for the rest, though, that's probably just a matter of faith. Number 5. The 7 pagodas of the Mahabalipuram. According to the myths of Mahabalipuram, there were 6 temples beneath the sea alongside a 7th which had long existed and was declared a World Heritage Site on the shore of a city both large and beautiful. So beautiful, in fact, that the gods grew jealous and sent a flood to destroy it all. It's the kind of story that of course sounds like fiction. That is until a tsunami changed things. In 2004, an earthquake and subsequent tsunami in the Indian Ocean caused the coast to recede near Mahabalipuram Temple in India, revealing the ruins of the legendary city. Whether it was a seaport or a temple is a matter for debate, but the most significant find right after the tsunami was a large stone lion that dated back to the 7th century. Ironically, it's believed that a tsunami destroyed the site in the first place. Number 4. The Pokai Haast's eagle. If you've never heard of the Pokai, you're not alone. This New Zealand cryptid was said to be a giant bird capable of carrying a human being off and devouring it. Scary stuff when you think about it, and definitely the kind of thing that you wish was not real. Unfortunately for some of our ancestors, it looks like this creature was very much a real thing and would have been extremely menacing to see swooping down from the skies. Fossils of a creature called Haast's eagle found in 2009 show a bird that was around 40 pounds in weight with a wingspan of 3 meters. It's believed that it would have preyed on large flightless birds like moas around 500 years ago, and likely would have been more than capable of picking up a small child and flying away with it. Females of the species would have been twice as large as the largest eagles that exist today, and the giant talons were sharp enough and strong enough to pierce not only flesh and muscle, but sink right into bones to lift prey from the ground. Because New Zealand has no native land mammals, this bird would have been the top of the food chain and the most terrifying thing the locals had ever seen. Number 3. The Hittites. The Old Testament frequently mentions the Hittites and their conflicts with the Israelites. For many years, their kingdom was one of the most powerful in all of the Middle East. It's said that they were a military force to be reckoned with. They even had progressive laws and rights relative to the time, and their land spanned over 600 miles from the Black Sea to Damascus. Despite how powerful they seemed, this nation faded so thoroughly from history that by the 19th century, most scholars believed their existence to be nothing more than myth due to the lack of historical reference outside of the Bible and the lack of archaeological evidence. In the year 1812, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt was traveling through Syria and discovered some writings that didn't match any hieroglyphs that he recognized from anywhere else in the world. For the next several decades, other explorers and researchers ventured to the same area, and in the year 1880, someone finally declared with authority that what they discovered was the land of the biblical Hittites. Number 2. Viking sunstones can really be used to navigate. One of the many remarkable legends of the Vikings that have survived in the modern day, one of the most interesting yet hard to believe, is about how they navigated their boats. It was said that they had a magical stone known as a sunstone that could be used to navigate even in the stormiest weather with the sun nowhere in sight. The rock itself would show where the sun was and allow them to navigate accordingly. It sounds preposterous, but perhaps it wasn't. In the year 2013, a crystal was found in a shipwreck from a British vessel that sank in 1592. Not a Viking ship by any means, but the crystal gives credence to the Viking legend of the Sunstone. The crystal was something known as an Icelandic spar, which has the curious characteristic of rhombohedral calcite crystals. If that sounds like gibberish to you, what you need to know is that these crystals are able to refract light in a way that when the crystal is aligned east to west, it creates a single clear image within it. When it's moved in another direction, you get a fractured image. Even in low light, this is able to work, which would allow navigators to determine they're heading east or west even when no sun was present. Number 1. Strengthening weapons with spirits of the dead. There's a lot of misinformation and bluster surrounding the history of the Vikings, but it's safe to say that they were formidable warriors when they threw down, and they were feared by their enemies. How they went about achieving this reputation is more interesting than many realize, including the Vikings themselves. It's said that the Vikings would imbue their weapons with the spirits of the dead in order to make them stronger and even more deadly in battle. On the surface, that sounds like total fiction. There is evidence throughout the region of ancient smiths used by the Vikings, including bones of humans and animals. While on the surface you could say that forging a weapon in a fire made from the body of one of your victims was a way to put the spirit into the blade, in reality the practice was imbuing carbon into the iron while it was being forged. Essentially, this was creating one of the earliest forms of steel, which was unknown at the time and would have made them superior to pure iron weapons. Archaeological evidence suggests that smiths may have taken bones from burial mounds so that the strength of ancestors could be added to the blades. Their understanding of what was happening was not accurate, but the end result was the same. A much stronger blade. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to check out our fantastic sponsor NordVPN, link below. And thank you for watching. We are all familiar with religious relics from an early age, despite our different locales, religions, and belief systems, and the world's relics do indeed form a major part of our shared human heritage. In fact, whenever we hear the word relic, the first item that comes to mind are usually venerated physical remains or specific objects that can be associated with Christianity, thanks in large part to pop culture like Indiana Jones movies. However, relics can actually be any significant object that has survived from an earlier time that is of historical interest, and it can include old tools, texts, and vessels. Bearing that in mind, we thought it would be a good idea to look at some of the most interesting ancient relics not related to Christianity that have been discovered to date. Number 10. The Big Shigir Idol. In 1894, gold prospectors exploring a peat bog near the Russian town of Yekaterinburg stumbled across something strange. A massive carved wooden statue over 16 feet, that's 5 meters long. Carefully sanded down, the colossal statue was found to have recognizable human faces and hands on both its front and back, as well as geometric lines and other interesting design features. The mouth of its recognizable human head is an open O. After its discovery, and for more than a century, the statue was exhibited as a novelty in the museum of the local town, believed to be only a few thousand years old. However, during 2018, it was discovered that the statue was not only carved from a single larchwood log, but that it was carved 11,600 years ago, around the end of the most recent ice age. The correct dating of the statue has crushed most of the common conceptions around prehistoric art left by hunter-gatherers dating back to the ice age. Although we can't know for sure what it depicted, we should never underestimate the people who carved it. They had the necessary resources and skills, including a very nuanced perception of the world. Number 9. The Piri Reis Map. The Piri Reis Map was discovered in Istanbul's Tophaci Palace's library by German historians in 1929. Drawn on gazelle skin, the map was verified to have been drawn in 1513 by Piri Reis, a preeminent and chronicled admiral of the then Turkish Navy. In an annotation, Piri Reis noted that the map was constructed around the information he found on several other older maps in Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic, even some that had been drawn by the explorer Christopher Columbus. The surviving fragments of the map depict the various parts of the world as it appeared to mapmakers around the 15th century. The map includes all the discovered land masses to date, but came with one mystery. It depicts the northern coastline of Antarctica across its bottom section, which according to historians had not been discovered until 1773. To compound matters, the continent is clearly connected to South America, and it is not covered with ice, as it has been for the last 6,000 years. Several historians have claimed that the representation of Antarctica is reliable, and that it follows the layout of the continent before it became covered with ice. Number 8. The Fasting Siddhartha Sculpture. The Fasting Siddhartha Sculpture, also known as the Fasting Buddha, dates back to the 2nd or 3rd century BC. This exceptional example of Gandhara artwork was unearthed in Sikri, Pakistan during the 19th century, and continues to be one of the most outstanding artifacts from Pakistan's classical period. The sculpture depicts an exceptional degree of detail that includes high reliefs, detailed arms, armpits, ribs, and even veins. In the strict sense, the sculpture should be called the fasting bodhisattva, as it represents an event that occurred well before the Buddha's enlightenment. On his spiritual journey, Siddhartha Gautama sought out a variety of self-denying rituals, including 49 days of meditation and no food, until he resembled a living corpse. Eventually, he came to the realization that knowledge and depth of understanding, not physical impoverishment, would give rise to his enlightenment. The sculpture was presented to the Lahore Museum of Pakistan in 1894, where it can be found on display to this day. Number 7. The Nebra Sky Disk. The Nebra Sky Disk has generated a fair amount of controversy. From the looters who initially unearthed the object with metal detectors to the subsequent court hearings and the continued dispute between archaeologists and even claims of retaliation, the disk remains one of Germany's most celebrated prehistoric objects. Many academics believe that it is the oldest known accurate depiction of the cosmos, possibly an astronomical measurement tool that was used as an ancient astronomical clock to calculate planting and harvesting times. The relic was allegedly discovered in 1999 near Nebra in Germany by looters who attempted to sell it on the black market. Due to numerous contradictions in the looters' stories on exactly how the artifact was obtained, historians continue to explore its exact origins and history to this day, but it is generally believed to be from the Bronze Age around 3,500 years ago. The sky disk was eventually recovered by law enforcement agents posing as dealers, and the looters were brought to justice. Today it is on display in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle. Number 6. The Ancient Plains. It's normal to find unexplainable artifacts in Egypt, but just like the famous Saqqara bird, several relics that mimic aircraft designs have been found throughout Central and South America. The Quimbaya artifacts specifically were found in Colombia. The Quimbaya civilization, dated around 1000 CE, created numerous items that represent modern aircraft from pure gold. Some of these relics even seem to have detailed tail struts and propellers, leading many to speculate that the ancient Colombians might have grasped the concept of aerodynamics and that these relics could be scale models of actual aircraft or gliders of some sort. The presence of so many parallels to modern-day aircraft underpins the out-of-place artifact theory made popular by a variety of pseudo-archaeologists and ancient alien theorists who claim that the items appear much too sophisticated for the Quimbaya. Although the Quimbaya created numerous different types of gold artifacts, over 120 in fact were recovered from looters by the government, the general public's attention remains focused on those that are believed to be too advanced for their civilization. Number 5. The Jade Discs. The jade discs, also known as biodiscs, are circular, flattened rings that were made during the late Neolithic period. They seem to have been of significant importance, as they were usually placed on the bodies of aristocrats and have been found in almost every single one of the significant tombs of the Hongshan culture and continued through to the Liangzhu culture of 3800 BC to 2000 BC. Because they were created in an era in which no metal tools or instruments were produced, the manner in which they were made, given that they were crafted from jade and extraordinarily hard rock, it is perplexing that China's ancient Neolithic inhabitants chose this material. Some archaeologists have proposed that they could have been made by brazing and polishing, but that would have taken the creators an exceptionally long time. Others believe that the arrival of the jade discs might be pertinent to the curious mystery of the Dropa stone, similar disc-shaped artifacts which reportedly existed before the jade discs and were found in a cave in the mountains of Bayan Kara Ula that lies on the China-Tibet border. The jade discs have been baffling archaeologists for decades, but since they hail from an era before the invention of writing systems, their purpose and significance remains a mystery. Number 4. The Devil's Bible. The Codex Gigas is the largest known ancient manuscript in the world. In fact, its name literally means giant book. The massive manuscript was created during the 13th century and was initially housed in a monastery in Podlazice. It includes the Old as well as the New Testament, but also a number of shorter texts dealing with matters of significant practicality for its era that included exorcism, medical works, and a calendar. It is commonly referred to as the Devil's Bible because of a detailed, full-page illustration of the devil, and indeed the legends of the single monk who supposedly created the book. A lot of speculation prevails on how the most unholy feature possible found its way into this truly religious text. However, the explanations remain limited. It might be because of the continued suspense that everybody embraces the Codex Gigas, or the Devil's Bible if you will. The weighty manuscript eventually made its way to Stockholm at the end of the 16th century after it was plundered by the Swedish army from the castle of the Holy Roman Emperor during the 30 Years' War. Number 3. Judean stone masks. The 9,000-year-old stone masks that have been excavated and otherwise found around the southern desert of Judea are among the most striking ancient artifacts of the region. To bring their age into perspective, King Solomon is believed to have existed about 3,000 years ago, Abraham just over 1,000 years before that, making these relics the earliest ceremonial treasures that we've come across worldwide. In addition to their age is their exceptional rarity. Only 16 have been verified as the real thing and are known to exist. The ancient Neolithic stone masks are also historically significant, as they were created at the specific time in history that we started to organize ourselves into communities. However, the exact purpose these masks served in a society 9,000 years ago remains a mystery. Much of the mystery has to do with the fact that almost all of the identified Neolithic masks originated from personal collections and have blurred origins without any archaeological backgrounds. Some believe that they could be linked to some form of ancestor worship, as they all have unique features that might have been worn during rituals or ceremonies. To date, only 2 of the 16 masks have definite archaeological backgrounds. One mask was retrieved from a cave at Nahar Hama, and the other mask is one that was purchased by Israeli General Moshe Dayan. Number 2. The Venus figurines. The Venus figurines are a collection of prehistoric sculptures of women that were created in the Paleolithic period. To date, more than 200 of these figurines have been discovered, mainly in Europe, but with findings as far as Siberia. Dating back to between 30,000 and 10,000 BC, they all have identical physical features, including voluptuous figures with ample bosoms, posteriors, abdomens, and thighs. Their heads are usually relatively small and deprived of any detail. Further, many of them lack hands and feet. The oldest uncovered to date is the Venus of Holler Fels, which dates back to 35,000 to 40,000 years ago. There is a significant divergence of views in both archaeological and paleoanthropological research on the possible roles and importance of these artifacts. Some of the various hypotheses put forward include that these figurines were created to stand in as fertility symbols, that they could have been self-portraits, that they were mere Stone Age dolls, that they were possible realistic representations of ordinary women, the ideal depictions of female sexuality, religious images, or even a pornographic imagery counterpart. Number 1. The Ubaid lizards. During excavations at the Tel al-Ubaid archaeological site in Iraq in the early 1900s, archaeologists uncovered an extraordinary find. Several 7,000-year-old figurines depicting humanoid figures with lizard-like attributes, including elongated heads, small contoured faces, and amygdaloid eyes. Many of the uncovered sculptures seem to have modern headgear on, while their delicately carved clothes suggested some sort of padding or insulation over their shoulder areas. The artifacts depict both male and female figures in a number of poses that represent an everyday life not so different from ours, including figures that carry scepters, presumably as a gesture of justice or righteousness. Much like the Sumerians, the origins of the Ubaidian people have remained obscure. The Ubaidians were, however, the first sophisticated culture in Sumer, and their civilization can be traced back to between around 5,500 and 4,000 BC. They lived in large villages, drained fertile marshes, expanded trade, and formed numerous industries such as leather and metalwork, stonework, pottery, and weaving. The Ubaidi culture eventually gave rise to a pre-Sumerian civilization that influenced and brought about impressive innovations in language and writing, as well as architecture and politics, all paving the way for modern life as we know it today. Archaeology has uncovered many secrets from the ancient world, but the Earth has a bad habit of eroding the past, making it difficult to piece together the stories of our ancestors. In the past couple of centuries, we've discovered Roman artifacts in the Americas, found ancient Greek cities in what was once thought to be the backwater of ancient Greece, puzzled over the success of the Incan economy, and have long searched for the core of history's first true empire. These mysteries prove that humanity needs to keep digging to uncover the truth, lest we repeat our past mistakes. Here are 10 mysteries of ancient civilizations. Number 10. The Romans may have discovered the New World. Before Columbus landed in San Salvador in 1492, the continent was discovered by a Norseman named Leif Erikson and a party of explorers from Iceland. They landed in what is now Canada on a trip to Newfoundland almost 500 years before Columbus. For a while, this was either disputed as myth or thought to have been the earliest discovery of the Americas. But the recent discovery of certain artifacts around the Americas has been putting this idea into question. We're talking about Roman artifacts discovered both on the continent and in her waters, such as a sunken Roman ship in Brazil's Guanabara Bay, terracotta amorphi, and tall jars clearly made during the Roman Empire's rule. The jars themselves date back to the 1st or 3rd century BCE. Wine, grains, and olive oil were stored inside these types of jars and transported all over the Roman Empire. Just outside of Mexico City, another terracotta artifact thought to belong to the ancient Roman Empire was found. The artifact is a carved head, and experts say it's a depiction of a Roman during the Hellenistic period, dating all the way back to 200 CE. Finally, the discovery of several caches of Roman coins have been found buried throughout North America and date back to the 16th century. Though some doubt has been raised as to the legitimacy of the coins, many archaeologists have seriously begun to consider the possibility that Roman settlers discovered the Americas in the ancient past. Though who, how, and why is still a mystery. Number 9. Ancient Roman mystery cults. Cults in the ancient Roman Empire have baffled archaeologists and historians alike because the evidence of their writings and artifacts have been poorly preserved. A mystery religion is defined by historians and archaeologists as one that offers individuals a religious experience not practiced officially by the state. The Mithraic cult, which historians seem to agree existed sometime before Christianity began to take over Rome as the primary religion, had most of its writings and artifacts destroyed after Christianity took hold. Though most scholars agreed that before this, the Roman government tolerated the Mithraic cult, as its views supported the government at the time. For every Roman god, there were probably one or two cults devoted to them, most of them starting as a family or a divergent version of the official state religion taken on by a clan. These cults would persist until the state absorbed them. Most of them featured an initiation ritual, just like today's cults, and were typically performed inside a large sanctuary. Just how many of these cults existed in the ancient world and what they believed, however, remains a mystery. Number 8. The Lost City of Paititi. The Lost City of Paititi and the quest to find it has claimed many explorers' lives. The legend even inspired Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World. This lost city of gold has eluded every treasure hunter, archaeologist, and would-be explorer who have gone searching for it. Finding the city would inform much about the ancient Inca civilization which thrived between 1400 and 1533 CE, extending across Western South America. After the discovery of a letter to the Pope in the Vatican archives from a missionary named Andre Lopez concerning the location of a large city rich with gold, silver, and jewels, the search for the city was renewed. Lopez's letter claimed the city was located in the middle of the jungle and called Paititi by the local indigenous tribes. The Pope and the Vatican kept the location secret for decades, but in 2016, a new expedition was set in motion. While that expedition turned up questionable artifacts in a site which is still being disputed today, the discovery of previously hidden cities throughout the Amazon, thanks to a combination of ground-penetrating radar and illegal logging and deforestation, has helped to keep the renewed fervor for the lost city alive. Number 7. The economy of the Incas. Most historians agree that the Incan economy was one of the most successful in the ancient world, but perplexingly, they did not use money or gold and only seemed to trade with outsiders. A lot of what we know of the Incas comes from the Spanish conquistadors who crushed their armies after unleashing a plague of smallpox upon them, wiping out 90% of their population. So how much of the Incas functioned as a society has been lost to time. Still, the question remains how the Incas were able to create such a thriving economy without currency or even trade. Some historians believe that the secret to their great wealth came from the unique tax system they used, which required every Incan citizen to pay labor to the state. Strangely, wealthy Inca who passed away were able to continue owning property, and some historians jest that it's almost as though they invented the idea of corporations as people without ever creating a market economy. Because of the difficult terrain and harsh environments of the Amazon, much of the Incas' way of life was dictated by a need to keep their people from starving rather than developing markets and traditional forms of economics. At least, that's what historians believe based on the little evidence that survives of the Incan civilization. Much of it still remains a mystery. Number 6. The Lost City of Tenea. The Lost City of Tenea was said to have been founded by prisoners of the legendary Trojan War, but it's thought that the city was abandoned sometime in the 4th century BCE. Archaeologists have been on the hunt for signs of the legendary city since a sarcophagus was discovered in a Greek village in 1984. More recently, though, archaeologists claim that the city has finally been discovered. An archaeological effort in the modern village of Chilomodi began in 2013, leading to excavators of the site there to proclaim that proof of the legendary city was at last discovered after a series of rare coins, 7 graves, and carefully constructed structures composed of clay, stone walls, and marble floors were unearthed. Whether or not the Trojan War actually happened is up for debate, but the things learned in Tanea may provide a clue, especially if proof is found that shows that the city was indeed settled by those fleeing from their defeat in the Trojan War. Whether this was at the hands of the legendary Odysseus or not remains to be seen, and the city itself holds many mysteries which archaeologists are eager to uncover. Number 5. The mystery of Teotihuacan. The ancient city of Teotihuacan stretches out for 20 square kilometers, contains nearly 2,000 single-story structures which appear to have been homes, and various impressive buildings like pyramids. The discovery of Teotihuacan may have been a major archaeological find, but its existence poses some problems for scholars as it's unknown who exactly built it. Originally, it was thought that the Toltec civilization must have built the city, but this was refuted when it was discovered that Teotihuacan peaked long after the Toltecs vanished. Other theories range from the Tartanags having built the city or immigrants fleeing the eruption of a volcano, but no conclusive theory has emerged. The city contains the hints of the Mayan, Mixtec, and Zapotec cultures, further adding to the mystery. Whoever built the city, scholars are certain that Teotihuacan was originally founded in 400 BCE, with the largest structures seeing their completion by 300 CE, and the city and culture reaching its peak nearly 100 years later, with a population of over 200,000 inhabitants. Number 4. The mystery of the origin of the Sumerian language. The Sumerian language appeared as early as 4000 BCE and dominated Sumerian civilization for nearly 1,000 years before being mostly replaced with Akkadian. The language was pictographic or cuneiform, meaning that individual images represent whole words, phrases, or sentences, much like Egyptian hieroglyphs or later languages like Chinese and Japanese. This language is quite mysterious because beyond Akkadian, there are no known ancestral forms of communication connected to it. Although some linguists think Sumerian could be related to Uralic languages such as Finnish and Hungarian, this view isn't shared throughout the academic community. Scholars suggest that if the Sumerian people did not originate from the area of Mesopotamia, then it's possible that their language could have been influenced by an older, still undiscovered language, but this is just a hypothesis. Number 3. The fall of the Akkadian Empire. The Sumerian Empire eventually fell to Sargon the Great, who established one of history's first empires. The Akkadian Empire was ruled from Sargon's city of Akkad. The Akkadians would succeed in nearly stamping out the Sumerian language, and Sargon would be succeeded by several other rulers after his death. But sometime after Shar-Kali-Shari took rule of the Akkadian Empire, things took a turn for the worst, and eventually what was once the world's first true empire would collapse in 2154 BCE. What caused it, though? Well, that's a bit of a mystery. Historians present 3 theories for the fall of Akkadia. The first is that the invasion of the Gutians, a people who dwelled in the mountains, proved to be too much for the disorganized Shar-Kali-Shari, who was already having difficulties maintaining order in the wake of his father's death. He also waged a seemingly indefinite war with the Elamites and the Amorites at the same time that the mountain people were invading. The second is that a combination of poor harvest, a great famine, and a great drought may have contributed or caused the collapse outright. In 2019, a study of fossil coral records from Oman provided evidence that winter dust storms, along with a longer winter than usual, may have sealed the Akkadian Empire's fate. The third possibility is that a meteor collision with the Earth set in motion drastic changes to the Earth's weather, causing the climate to change around an already struggling empire. Number 2. The lost ruins of Vlokos. In 2015, archaeologists uncovered what appeared to have been the site of a Greek village called Vlokos. At the time of the discovery, they wrote it off as something not important, thinking that the remains atop the hill were nothing more than the remains of a Greek village. That was until they discovered the remnants of towers, gates, and a city grid, which hinted at there being a deeper story to the ruins. With new information, the site is now considered to have been the center of a Greek city, one which flourished sometime during the 4th century BCE and was abandoned by the 3rd century BCE. Why it was abandoned, though, remains a mystery. Archaeologists and scholars think that a likely candidate is the invasion of Roman forces. Using ground-penetrating radar, archaeologists hope to uncover more of the city's secrets. What is interesting about this site is that this area of Greece was previously thought to have been a backwater of the ancient Greek world, so archaeologists and scholars haven't really paid much attention to it so far. Number 1. The city of Akkad. No one knows where the city of Akkad was located. We know a great deal about the man who supposedly built it, Sargon the Great, and the empire he ruled, but the capital city itself has long eluded scholars and archaeologists. It's been told that Sargon the Great built the city along the bank of the western Euphrates River, possibly between the cities of Kish and Sippar, though Mari and Babylon have been offered as other potential possibilities as well. There are a number of excavation sites which scholars think could be candidates for the city of Akkad. Most of these places are situated east of the Tigris, which is part of the Euphrates, but there is much debate as to which of these might be the true site of the capital of the Akkadian Empire. How the city fell and where it was located is almost as great a mystery as to how the Akkadian Empire fell. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Vessi. $25 off using the code TopTenz. Link below, and thank you for watching. Myth and legends are full of wondrous places that capture the imagination and have inspired generations of adventurers to explore the world in search of their treasures. Often they come up empty-handed, but every once in a while there seems to be a sliver of truth to the tales of these mythical places. Let's take a look at 10 that may have been based in some degree of reality. Number 10. Atlantis. The story of Atlantis can be traced to the Greek philosopher Plato. He spoke of the fabled lands back in 360 BC. In Plato's telling, Atlantis was a land of rich and powerful people who were technologically advanced. It was not a complimentary tale, though, and his stories about it were meant to illustrate that their knowledge and might had corrupted them as a people. For most of history, these tales were regarded as allegorical, used by Plato to illustrate a point. There are no other writings of this time that ever mention anything like Atlantis, so it was generally considered just to be something he made up to be illustrative. Not everyone believes that that was the case, though. In more recent years, the belief that Atlantis may have been based on Minoan society has achieved some notoriety. The Minoan kingdom, ruled by King Minos, was said to be remarkably wealthy and advanced and had spread across much of ancient Greece. Minoans had paved roads and were believed to have been the first Greek society to use a written language. And then, one day, they just vanished. It's believed that sometime around 1600 BC, a massive earthquake set off volcanoes on the Minoan island known as Thera, burying it and destroying the culture forever. Number 9. Norumbega. Norumbega was said to be a legendary land of riches named for an Algonquin word for the area discovered by the Vikings well before North America was settled by the Europeans. It showed up on maps in the 1500s and was situated around modern-day New England. Archaeological evidence doesn't support the idea that the Vikings ever settled anywhere that far south, and there's only one confirmed Viking settlement in North America that exists in Newfoundland. That doesn't mean there weren't others, though, and there is some evidence to suggest that Vikings did in fact settle farther north in places. So what about Norumbega? The people of Boston commissioned a statue of Leif Erikson in the 1870s in honor of his discovery of this legendary land. In Viking tales, North America was called Vinland, or at least that's what some people believe. Other historians who have analyzed the often contradictory data presented in Viking sagas have determined that Vinland couldn't be where the Vikings landed in Newfoundland because of the lack of certain features like salmon and grapes. It's believed that those things were found farther south around Martha's Vineyard, perhaps as far down as Boston, which would have lent itself to the Norumbega myth. Number 8. Shangri-La. The legendary city of Shangri-La traces its origins to the works of British author James Hilton. He wrote of the city in his 1933 novel Lost Horizon. According to Hilton, Shangri-La was essentially an earthly paradise hidden within the Kunlun Mountains. While many have dismissed the story as pure fantasy created by Hilton, others believe that there's some truth to it, especially because Tibetan myths hold that there were several such cities hidden within the mountains. In 1998, explorers trekking through the area discovered an area that they believe may have actually inspired the Shangri-La story. To the best of their knowledge, no Western humans had ever set foot in the place. Called the Hidden Falls of Sangpo, this valley of lush greenery was hidden even from satellite imagery in the mountains. Number 7. El Dorado. The legendary city/kingdom/empire of El Dorado is arguably one of the most interesting in all of mythology. Conquistadors searched throughout South America to find this place, which was apparently a vast city made of solid gold. While some legendary places were based entirely in fiction, and other places like Xanadu turned out to actually be real, the truth about El Dorado is a complete sidestep from either of these things. Perhaps the results of the same phenomenon that happens during the telephone game, when you tell a story to one person and they tell it to another and they tell it to another and the details get muddled. The truth of El Dorado also changed over time. The idea that El Dorado was a golden kingdom came from something a little less vast, but still pretty impressive. El Dorado was no kingdom, but a king. Archaeological evidence shows that El Dorado was a person who was, for all intents and purposes, golden. This chieftain would be covered from head to toe in gold, and every day would bathe in a sacred lake to wash the gold off before applying it again the next day. Unlike most other legends, this makes El Dorado curiously true and false at the same time, sort of like Schrodinger's cat. Neither outcome was expected, but not entirely false either. Number 6. Camelot. The story of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table is a pretty fantastic one, especially when you consider it involves pulling a magical sword from a stone and a wizard. These things are generally not found in real-life history. Despite that, there's some evidence that Arthur's stomping grounds, better known as Camelot, was an actual real place at some point in time, even if Arthur was never a real man, or perhaps a gestalt of several kings. Retired British professor Peter Field believed he stumbled upon the actual location of Camelot while doing some research. Based on his findings, he came to the conclusion that Camelot was a Roman fort at Slack, to the west of Huddersfield in West Yorkshire. The Roman fort, called Camelondunum, was strategically placed, but currently exists underneath a golf course, so any excavation is probably going to have to wait a few years. Number 5. High Brazil. Said to be located off the coast of Ireland, the island of Brazil, sometimes called High Brazil, so as to not confuse it with the South American country, is supposedly hidden except for one day every 7 years. You don't need to have a degree in geography to know that that is not a realistic feature of most islands, which is why it's generally considered to be purely fictitious. Despite the mysterious nature of the island, there have been accounts of people discovering similar places over the years. The islands appeared on maps as early as the year 1325 and continued to appear on maps all the way until the year 1800. Several explorers and sailors claimed to have either seen or even visited the islands, though most who went in search of it came back empty-handed. It's been theorized that the Porcupine Bank might be the actual source of the story, a raised shoal in the general vicinity where High Brazil was said to exist. Number 4. Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Constructed in the 6th century BC by King Nebuchadnezzar II, the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon were supposed to be quite the sight to behold. Cascading gardens that reached 75 feet in height and featured flowers, herbs, and all manner of exotic plant life to such an extravagant degree, they became known as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And as far as anyone knew in modern times, they had never existed at all. In order for such a garden to have existed, an impressive irrigation system had to have been constructed to bring enough water into the desert for all the plants to thrive. No evidence in modern times has ever been found to indicate such a massive undertaking ever existed around Babylon. It doesn't necessarily mean that it didn't exist, though. According to research by Dr. Stephanie Daly, the reason we never found any evidence of the Hanging Gardens in Babylon was that they were never in Babylon in the first place. She believes she discovered evidence of their existence in the ancient city of Nineveh, part of the Assyrian Empire. Daly's research shows Assyrian king Sennacherib was responsible for an extravagant garden about a century before the supposed Babylonian version. His writings describe such a thing, including irrigation technology, thought not to exist until 4 centuries later. Number 3. Zerzura. West of the Nile, somewhere in the desert in Egypt or Libya, was said to be the legendary oasis of Zerzura. Written accounts of it can be traced back to the 13th century, mentioning a city that was as white as a dove. It was said that it was ruled by a sleeping king and queen. It was guarded by black giants, and it was full of treasures. Numerous European explorers set out to discover the location of Zerzura in more modern times, some as late as the 1930s. It was in 1932 when Hungarian explorer Laszlo Almasi led an expedition through the desert and discovered a series of wadis. Though there was no shining white city with a sleeping king, the truth was that they did discover some oases in the desert that had been clearly visited by the local nomads who had built huts around the area. It's worth noting that in the recounting of Almasi's tale, he started his day of discovery by dusting the desert sand off his plane. Had there been something in that area in the past, it's just as likely that the desert had swallowed it and only the vegetation remained. Regardless of whether there was a real city or not, the oasis does seem to have existed, and it's possible something else may once have been there as well. Number 2. Thule. In ancient Greek and Roman writings, the farthest north you could get was a land called Thule. It was in the 4th century BC when Greek explorer Pytheas came to Athens with stories of this land where the sun never set and the land and ocean came together in a sort of jelly-like substance. So, well, That was weird. In later years, some people came to believe that perhaps what Pythias was describing was Iceland or even Greenland, but the details didn't always line up. In time, people came to believe that Pythias had just made up the entire story. The only problem was he had been consistently reliable with what he had written about in the past. And the fact remains that his description of the Arctic summer was accurate. When you go far enough north, you will reach places where the sun stays up for days at a time. It would be a remarkable thing for him to have just guessed at. Pythias claims to have discovered the land 6 days across the sea from the Orkney Islands. The people there were said to be fair-skinned and with light hair and barbarians by his description. In later years, the Nazis would latch onto this story and mount their own expedition to find Thule, believing it to be the birthplace of the Aryan race. Obviously, the Nazis never found this mythical land of Aryan supremacy, but there were enough details of a land that clearly existed somewhere in the Arctic to confirm that wherever Pythias had gone, it was likely a real place. Number 1. Sodom and Gomorrah. In the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, God told Abraham that the two cities were going to be destroyed because of how wicked the inhabitants were. Abraham's nephew Lot lived in one of the towns, and Abraham didn't really want to see him destroyed. Only Lot and his family were worthy enough to live, so they were told they could flee just as long as they didn't look back. But as they left, Lot's wife took a peek and was turned into a pillar of salt. As for everyone else in town, well, nothing remained. You'd think the historical evidence for two cities destroyed by God himself would be pretty thin, but there is a belief that the two cities did exist, and the ruins are currently near a former peninsula of the Dead Sea in Israel. As for God's wrath, it took the form of an earthquake that was believed to hit the region in around 1900 BCE, and naturally occurring petroleum and other gases in the area may have actually exploded and rained fire at the time. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do smash that like button below. Also, subscribe to this channel. We got brand new videos every day of the week. And as always, thank you for watching.
By now, it's pretty safe to assume that approximately everyone has seen this video of Lars Anderson kicking more ass with a bow and arrow than all of Legolas's scenes in the extended edition of Lord of the Rings combined. While many have been quick to point out that Anderson's abilities and claims in that video are hyperbolic, it still rekindled an interest in archery. So, we decided to compile a list of some of the most awesome, verifiable acts of arrow-based badassery from all of history. Number 10. Mongol bowmen could hit targets better than modern riflemen. Few warriors from history, save perhaps the Spartans and maybe the Jedi, were as feared or respected on the battlefield as the Mongol archers. What made the Mongols so terrifying in battle was the fact that there was almost no range at which you were safe from being hit. There are reliable sources that state that Mongol archers could routinely hit targets over 500 meters away. To put that in perspective, the gun the United States Army uses today has a maximum deadly range of about 600 meters, with a reliable kill range of about half that, meaning technically at distances over 400 meters, a Mongol archer would pose more of a threat to you than a US Marine. Number 9. English longbowmen had buff skeletons. The English longbow is one of those weapons where the myths surrounding it have become so intertwined with the reality that it's hard to separate one from the other. Various legends exist about English longbowmen being able to hit a man in the crotch from 500 yards, or let loose an arrow capable of punching through plate armor like it was made of knockoff iPhone screens. Weirdly, it seems that there's a surprising amount of truth to these legends. Historically, recovered longbows have been noted to have draw weights, the amount of weight required to pull a bowstring taut, in excess of 150 pounds, which is almost triple what you would find on the average bow today. This not only meant that longbows back then were able to hit targets from an astonishing distance away, but that the men using them were almost superhumanly strong. The skeletons of longbowmen are noted as being easy to identify because their right arms are almost always bigger than their left, being upwards of 50% more dense due to years of repeated longbow use. So yes, longbowmen used bows that were so difficult to draw and shoot that they left behind buff skeletons. Number 8. King Amenhotep II and the brass plates. King Amenhotep II is notable for two reasons. First, his name makes him sound like a bad guy from The Mummy, and second, he was a total baller in his youth. According to historical artifacts recovered from the ancient world, Amenhotep was well known for being a gifted athlete. Along with being a great runner, wrestler, and listener, Amenhotep was supposedly awesome with a bow and arrow and was famous for wielding an incredibly powerful custom-made bow. According to legend, Amenhotep had the bow constructed constructed specifically so that only he would be strong enough to draw it. Whether or not this is true is unknown, but what is known is that Amenhotep's bow was sufficiently strong enough to fire an arrow clean through a thick brass plate. Legend has it that Amenhotep was able to make this shot 4 times from the back of a speeding chariot, while other sources state that he simply shot at targets from a standing position. Either way, it's almost certain that Amenhotep was packing some seriously oversized guns for an Egyptian pharaoh. Number 7. Nasu no Yoichi and his fan shot. Nasu no Yoichi is a legendary figure in Japanese history, and almost every story about him involves at least 3 separate instances of archery-based ass-kicking. Perhaps the most famous story is the time he hit a fan from several hundred feet away because his boss told him to. The story goes that during the Battle of Yoshima during the Genpei War, Nasu's superior, Yoshitsune, spied an enemy ship with a comically large decorative fan atop its mast meant to serve as a good luck charm to ward off arrows. Annoyed at the audacity, Yoshitsune ordered Nasu to wade into the water and shoot it down. Word of this quickly spread through the ranks, and by the time Nasu was taking aim, everyone had stopped to watch. Despite being hundreds of feet away and having to compensate for the wind, Nasu was able to take out the fan with a single arrow. This is probably a good thing because Nasu said that he would kill himself if he missed. Number 6. Demosthenes' archers made Spartans surrender. The Spartans are largely considered to be one of the most fearsome and deadly fighting forces the world has ever known. They turned not giving a crap into an art form, and they perfected both sass as well as its variant, extreme sass. One of the reasons that Spartans were feared was because they just didn't give up. Spartans considered dying on the battlefield to be the ultimate honor, and in Spartan culture, surrendering was one of the most embarrassing things that you could do. Demosthenes, an Athenian, well, he made Spartans surrender. Demosthenes' historic feat occurred during a battle on Spacteria, a small island a few miles away from Sparta that Demosthenes figured would make a pretty good strategic stronghold. All he had to do was kill the 300 Spartans stationed there to defend it, because apparently there was no problem the Spartans felt required more than 300 men. Demosthenes invaded the island with nothing more than archers and spearmen, and against everyone's expectations managed to pin down the Spartan warriors. Realizing the Spartans were as good as dead, Demosthenes offered them the chance to surrender, an offer they readily accepted. That made the battle the first time in all of history that a Spartan had surrendered. Prior to this, a Spartan warrior had never been captured alive, and Demosthenes' archers were able to capture 100 of them in one go. As you'd expect, even in surrender the Spartans weren't happy. When asked what they thought of arrows, one prisoner sneered, "The arrow would be quite a weapon if it just killed the brave." Number 5. Lubu stopped a fight with 1 arrow. If you've ever played a Dynasty Warriors game, you'll know that you're not supposed to pursue Lu Bu. For everyone else, Lu Bu is a famed, almost mythical figure from Chinese history who's had more rumors spread about his physical prowess than Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee combined. One of the most realistic feats attributed to him is the time he stopped a fight by showing off how cool he was. During a meeting with 2 generals who were this close to slaughtering each other, Bu had a subordinate place a halberd a few hundred feet away from him. He then pulled out his bow. He then said, "You will now witness me attempting to shoot an arrow at the branch of the halberd head. If I hit, you shall withdraw your troops. If I miss, you can remain here and fight." The men, not believing the shot was possible, humored him and agreed to the terms. Without even taking aim, he notched an arrow and cleanly split it in 2 against the halberd's edge. Impressed and no doubt terrified that Bu would turn the bow on them if they kept making trouble, the generals withdrew their troops. Number 4. Minamoto no Tamatomo once sunk a ship with a single arrow by accident. Minamoto no Tamatomo is a figure from Japanese history famed for his bow skills. Unlike Yuichi, who we previously mentioned, who was known for being small and humble, Tamatomo was known to be freaking huge. Seeing as he was roughly the size of a medium to large fridge, Tamamoto basically spent his time doing whatever he felt like. This culminated in him exiling himself to an island for reasons he never decided to explain. When the Japanese government asked Tamamoto to pay taxes on his fancy new island, he told them that since the island was his private property, he'd do no such thing. The government, not realizing how lucky they'd got off, decided to send a small fleet of warships to Tamamoto's island in a futile attempt to intimidate him into paying up. In response, Tamamoto took out his bow and fired off an oversized blunt arrow towards one of the ships. Instead of sailing harmlessly over the fleet to serve as a warning as he had originally intended, the arrow smashed violently into the side of the lead ship, putting a hole in its hull big enough to sink it. The rest of the fleet, realizing that Tamamoto just took out a boat with 1 arrow by accident, decided to cut their losses and leave him alone. Number 3. Wei Fei could hit 9 bullseyes in a row. One of the most popular feats attributed to Wei Fei, a 12th century Chinese general, is the fact that he could hit 9 bullseyes in a row from 240 feet away. While this may not seem impressive compared to some of the other things in this video, Wei Fei's versatility is what landed him here. Along with being an archer competent enough to hit a dime-sized target like it's nothing, Wei Fei was a skilled boxer and martial artist, and was so feared in combat that it wasn't uncommon for men to desert and swear allegiance to him in the middle of battle. There are many reasons he became a Chinese folk hero, but those have got to rank right up there. Number 2. Finn, a man who hit another archer's bow. Little is known about the archer known only as Finn, save for the fact that he pulled off one of the most outlandish archery tricks ever recorded, shooting the bow of another archer out of his hands. The details surrounding the time Finn told physics to take a day off happened to be well recorded because they took place during the Battle of Svolder. This was a battle between King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway and his greatest hits collection of enemies. During the battle, the king noticed that Jarl Erik, one of the leaders of the opposing fleet, just so happened to be floating by. Spying a chance to turn the tide of battle, the king ordered his best archer to try and kill Erik with a well-placed arrow to the dome. The archer fired 2 arrows at Erik. They both missed, but the second came just close enough for Erik to note where it came from. While the archer was preparing to fire a 3rd arrow, Erik ordered his best archer, Finn, to return fire. Finn fired an arrow that hit his opponent's bow, causing it to explode in his hands. In case you're wondering, yep, Erik won the battle. Number 1. Jebe, the archer who shot Genghis Khan's favorite horse. We started this video by talking about Mongol archers, and we're going to end it by talking about perhaps the coolest one of all, Jebe. Jebe is noted as being one of Genghis Khan's finest and most loyal generals, which is kind of awesome when you realize that they first met because Jebe shot Genghis Khan's favorite horse in the face. The story goes that during a battle with a rival tribe in 1201, a warrior then known as Zergadai shot and killed the horse Genghis Khan was riding on. After the battle, a furious Khan demanded to know which soldier had fired the arrow. To his surprise, Zergadai stood up, which must have been tough considering the size of his balls, and proudly took credit for the shot. Rather than executing him on the spot like you'd expect, Khan decided to reward Zergadai's bravado by making him one of his generals. To commemorate the occasion, he gave Zergadai the new name of Jebe, which roughly translates to arrow. So the next time you think you've screwed up, just remember that one time a man shot the favorite horse of one of history's most famously brutal leaders and was rewarded instead of punished. In other words, if you're going to screw up, make sure you do it right. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. And as always, thank you for watching.